Welcome to foundersmetal.com, the place where inspirational founders share their battle stories.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Founders Metal, the inspirational podcast where I interview founders of nonprofits and for-profits alike around their battle stories and their experiences. My name is Patrick Ache, and today I'm very, very honored to be joined by Betty Enyonam Kumahor. Betty, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Hello, everyone.
Betty has a very gloried CV. Betty is a Young Global Fellow for the World Economic Forum, as well as the co-founder and director of numerous nonprofit organizations and around entrepreneurship, tech. Betty's background is in tech. She worked at Ernst Young for a number of years as a senior systems and analyst and as an analyst generally, as well as founding now the Cobalt Partners, being a co-founder of the Cobalt Partners, which I will say is also a tech-based software consultant. Betty, we're very honored to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for the introduction.
You're very welcome, Betty, and thank you so much for honoring us with your presence and sharing your experiences with us. Betty, let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to start? You've started a number of businesses. Can I ask maybe what inspired you to start the Cobalt Partners?
The Cobalt Partners is an interesting story. I had just come out of spending 2.5 years building a software development firm across Africa. We actually did work in 16 different countries. And I thought I would take 6 months off and have a break. But immediately, before anybody even knew I was leaving, I started getting a whole host of requests from various companies and sort of contacts that I had asking me to help them with some problem they had. So within about 10 days, calendar days, I had to pull out an Excel spreadsheet and list them all. And then I actually put a value to all of it. And I realized that I basically had the beginning of a sales pipeline for a consulting firm. So I thought I better create the firm.
That is beautiful. You basically had opportunities come to you and decided to, instead of maybe joining one of these companies full-time or servicing all of them as a business.
Yeah, it's always been hard for me to say no. And especially when it's like that, when they're people that you've known for many years, you want to make sure that you can solve their challenge. Of course, I could try and refer them to others, but I couldn't quite think of who I felt comfortable actually solving the challenge in the best way possible. So yeah, I had to gear up to solve them.
Sure. And in terms of actually getting the Cobalt Partners started, what was your greatest challenge?
I would say the largest challenge was working capital. I'm a firm believer that bootstrapping your business brings about a lot of efficiencies that you basically cannot anticipate in the beginning. That constraint in particular has a way of maturing your business and making it stronger than you would otherwise anticipate or be able to do. So even though it was a challenge, it was probably a healthier challenge. Some of the challenges that I get concerned about are things like talent, really sort of being able to build a sales pipeline and sort of making sure that you have the market and you can access the market. So those I had. So I wasn't too concerned. I had enough to sort of bootstrap it. So that was good.
Sure. So you did say working capital was the biggest challenge, but then again, you sort of turned that on its head and said, actually finding your own way to getting those resources is the solution to that. A lot of people out there look for funding and perhaps they miss out on the opportunity to really understand the business and to really use their ingenuity to meet their own challenges.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I mean, the things that you would do when you're flush with cash are very different from the things that you do when you're not flush with cash. And what I found is that when you're not flush with cash, you just, like you said, ingenuity, you think creatively. You have to really sort of understand the guts of what you're doing. You have to find the shortest path to the most effective sort of growth agenda. And so, yeah, it's definitely a constraint. It can definitely be uncomfortable, but I think it's an important constraint, especially in the early stages if you want to shape a sustainable business.
Sure. Put it down to one word, sustainability. Having a lot of money allows you to take risks that perhaps you can't afford to make because you haven't yet found a revenue source, a sustainable business. Having to battle initially is a very good experience from speaking to various other founders. Thank you for sharing that experience as well. Betty, now that you've set up the Cobalt Partners, you've overcome the challenge of bootstrapping. You did see that there was a need for your services. What are your current responsibilities, would you say?
So I'm the managing partner. I'm also the founding partner. As the founding partner, I'm sort of keeping steady the vision of Cobalt. So we definitely want to be a multi-year company, 50-year-old plus firm. And so thinking about that is really my role as a founding partner. As a managing partner, it's really making sure that all of our engines, I call them, I believe that a business is made up of various engines, whether it's your sales engine or your delivery engine, running operations, getting in talent. And so as a managing partner, my job is to ensure that each of the engines is designed well and resourced effectively, and there's enough gas in each one of them to get going, and that they're all working in harmony. So that's really kind of the description I would give, although quite colorful.
Sure. And in doing that, what are your key services as a company, would you say?
So the Cobalt Partners is really an advisory firm. Our focus is really being catalysts for business, which is what Cobalt is. It's a catalyst. Everybody sort of knows it as the Cobalt blue, but Cobalt is actually a silver color, and it takes on many different colors depending on what it reacts with. And so that's how we see ourselves, as partnering with organizations to make them brighter and bigger and better. And we do that with a number of core competencies, primarily around design thinking, technology in all its various forms, whether it's sort of helping you build your IT organization or helping you build a piece of software or hosting your infrastructure. We do all of that. And then we also are your traditional sort of management consultants. Wherever you're looking to improve performance in your organization, you can call us. We do things like leadership development and training. We'll do things like taking a business from a small to medium size, or from medium size to a larger size. So yeah, we do a whole host of management consulting activities as well.
And how have you found actually moving away from the technical roles? Because even in the description of the inspiration for your company's name, we get a sense of your background in chemistry, which I believe you did get a degree in.
Remember.
How did you move from working in your business to working on your business?
I've always been a consultant. So even though I've had a strong technology background, I really come from a management consulting background. Even while in grad school, which I did straight after undergrad, my first job then was a management consultant in CSC in the US. So I've always thought of technology more of as a tool to really help businesses improve. And so I've been lucky in that I've had the opportunity to work in many different kinds of companies and sort of see that each one of them is very different. And that your ability to be successful is directly related to how much time you spend thinking about your business and not getting emotionally entangled in your business, because it really is a separate entity. Maybe that came from business law, I don't know. But yeah, I always think of it as a separate entity, and you've got to figure out how to help it grow, how to make sure that it can stand its own 2 feet, even if you're not there or it's a lot larger than you. And so I don't think that I had much of a transition from working in a company to thinking about a company and working on something.
Because you always had that consultant mindset where you looked at the whole and you were a little bit detached about the company because you were brought in to sort of have that objective third-party view from the start. However, this is your baby. How do you keep that mindset of being, detached?
I don't think of it as that. I don't think of it as my baby, actually.
Okay.
I think of it as a thing I'm having to create, and I certainly want it to be self-sufficient, and it should be able to go on without me. It certainly can have a longer lifespan than I can. So, yeah, I just think I just don't have that mindset of keeping it so close to my chest. I think there are times when you're starting out that you're the only holder of the vision and the belief that this can work, and you have the full view of why it can work. And then you hold it close. And then I guess I treat it more like a baby. But I'm always very quick to let things go. I've never taken a job without knowing when I wanted to leave, what I wanted to get that role to before I left.
Okay. So having the end vision in sight, but also realizing that this is something that is separate from you, even though you may created it and have the founding vision for it, it is not just you. It is a separate entity and it doesn't belong to you. So it's similar to perhaps letting the birds leave the nest. And yeah. Okay. That's a really great insight. A lot of founders, entrepreneurs, social enterprise founders get too overly attached to what they've created and forget the ultimate vision that they want to create. Overly control processes and the organization. Great insights. I now move on to a section I like to call the crucible. I call it that because I try to put you on the spot as a founder and ask you hard-hitting questions, seeking to get valuable insights. They're not too hard, don't worry. So you've pointed to some of the answers to this question. But despite your experiences, your deep experiences in management consultancy and software advisory and tech advisory, some people, despite having very deep experience in certain sectors, still suffer from something I would say is the imposter syndrome. Like, why me? Why would I succeed? And don't go about realizing or creating whatever idea it is that they have in their minds. What allowed you to overcome this self-doubt or imposter syndrome and actually found the Cobalt Partners as well as the many other businesses you founded in the past?
Perhaps it's very much the same thing. What I just talked about, sort of thinking of the business as a separate entity, that helps me counter that. Because for me, I always say the first place to fail, and every organization goes through failures, especially as it's starting out and growing. First of all, I anticipate that the failures will be there and that we'll have to just navigate them. It only makes us better. And secondly, the first place I want to fail is on paper. So, and that's the first thing that I did. I sort of did the sales pipeline, and then I wrote out the business model. What would we need in terms of expenses and costs, and would it work? And so that gives you a little bit of confidence when you see that working. And then you start thinking about all of the risks and how would I adjust this model to compensate for these major risks. And it worked. It didn't fall apart on paper. So it looks like it's doable. And that kind of gives you the confidence to actually start doing it in real life.
Sure. And I picked out from that the key things, always realizing that this is something separate, always preparing for failure. And usually the best way to do that is on paper initially. And you mentioned business model, creating that. Perhaps if you're not conversant with the methods, seeking a professional or someone who has experience with it, or somebody in your industry who has experience in it. So those are really valuable insights, Betty. Thank you so much for sharing them. And then you answer this question. I always ask, why this? Some people start businesses based on an idea, but you actually had people come to you and say, we need your help. And you saw in that an opportunity, and you saw in that the beginnings of a business. Can you tell me how that happened in terms of these are different requests, weren't they? What made you think that actually this could be converted into a business?
I think it was more that I couldn't say no to people asking for help. That's always been one of my challenges. Can't say no. So I had to figure out how to help everybody. And so it was more of a need on my part to be able to maintain the relationships that I had. If there was an alternative, to refer them to another firm that I felt was capable and had all the mix that what Cobalt now has essentially to do it, then I might have found a different solution. But I just knew I had to figure out a way get others. And I think part of the reason was also that I knew that there were a host of people who wanted to work with me in some capacity or other. And so the people would be there. And that if I pulled it together into a firm, we would actually be able to do some very cool and great work and have a good time doing it. So yeah, it was basically a need to respond to people with a yes rather than a no.
That is amazing. Always be ready to say yes. I think that allows you to experience a lot of joy in life, I suppose. And you mentioned something else. You mentioned that you had help. You have co-founders. I believe you have around 5 of them, 5 other co-founders. That is astounding, in fact, that you have that pool of talent and people that you trust. Can I ask you around your learnings from creating this team? What are some of the key things that others who are out there, who are perhaps alone, who perhaps have a need for more co-founders or more partners? What should they look for in a co-founder?
I think a lot of people can tend to approach relationships as in what can I get from that person, or they're very transactional. I definitely haven't done that in my life. Maybe it's because I sort of came from a consulting background and totally appreciate sort of what people and teams can do together. But I've always sort of gone through my career really sort of looking at people not just as, the developer I'm working with or the project manager I'm working with or the partner I'm working with, but for them, for who they are and sort of what they're good at and what they want to do long term. I've always taken a very long term view to people. So I think the first thing, if you're looking for a founder, is who have you worked with before? Who have you interacted with before? And are there people that you think you can team well with and can trust? I think that there's a lot of challenge that comes from partnerships when you don't know the person enough and you're not quite sure whether you can trust them, rely on them, or pull from them, without them also being able to do the same from you. So yeah, I think it's who can you trust and who can you have a long-term relationship with.
Okay, so trust is key, and the friendship, as you mentioned, having ability to have a long-term relationship with that person, because it's almost as if you're getting in a sort of a platonic marriage. If you go into business together, you have to spend a lot of time with each other. So it's important for you to actually like each other, or at least be able to get along. And in terms of trust, you mentioned having worked with someone in the past being a key, because although you may be friends with somebody, I think that working relationships and business actually bring out another aspect of people's character. So it's important to realize whether to actually see if you can trust that person in a work setting. And maybe that's where your rich and varied work experience actually was a great resource for you, because you were able to pick out from all these different industries you've worked in and organizations you work for, people that sort of fit that bill. What about others who maybe don't have that rich and varied work experience? Think of a few well-known co-founders. The two Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were high school classmates, and they worked together on multiple things before actually founding Apple, as did Bill Gates and Paul Allen. They knew each other in school and worked together on a number of things. Is that perhaps something you can do with a potential co-founder if you don't know him that well? Test it out in terms of working on a few projects. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that having similar value systems, and a lot of that does get formed in school. So it's not surprising to me that a lot of, not just work relationships, but even marriages, personal marriages actually start out with people who actually went from the same school or come from a similar background. So yeah, I do think that business relationships are very different from personal relationships. I mean, I have some business relationships with people where I haven't even necessarily been to their house, they haven't been to my house, but we sort of know what the relationship is, and it's good. So I think for me, strong relationships really come from mutual understanding, mutual respect, and I think that's what leads to trust. So I think it's anybody that you can sort of link in who has a similar value system to you, even if they think very differently about how they want to build the business. If you have mutual respect for one another, you can generally work through sort of any challenges or misunderstandings.
That is extremely key that you mentioned that. Thank you for adding that insight, that valuable insight, Betty. And I usually ask, what has been, you think, your greatest failure, if any, to date? And what did you think you learned from it?
It's a good question. My greatest failure to date is probably not taking more risk.
It looks varied. Are you sure?
Yeah, I've been having this conversation recently because I do believe myself to be a risk-averse person, oddly enough. But yes, I do take chances, but I feel like I could take more, probably. Yeah.
Did you miss out on Facebook's IPO? Is that one of the things you hitting yourself on the...
Yeah, that wouldn't be one of the things that would be on my list ever. But yeah, I could probably take more risk.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a really interesting insight there. But at the same time, do you think perhaps the reason you've been so successful is that you haven't just taken risk willy-nilly, and there may be no reason to really beat yourself up about that, because I think perhaps you have reached where you wanted to go and had fun along the journey. Maybe. I
definitely don't have a destination in mind, but thank you very much for that.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Yeah, maybe I should just improve that a bit more. Yeah.
Sure. Yes, yes. The grass is usually not greener on the other side. And Betty, I'd like to end off with this one question. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself when you started your entrepreneurial journey?
I would say have more fun. Don't take it so seriously.
Sure.
It's not heart surgery. It's not. Have more fun is what I would say.
Unless that's your business. Unless that's your business.
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. Yeah. But even so, it would be about worrying less, trying to predict the future. I sort of come from a risk consulting background as well. And, as a risk auditor, you're sort of trained to look and see risks all the time and try to mitigate them all the time. And I think that it can take the magic out of the process and the moment. And so, I think I've done a fairly good job of sort of enjoying the big moments, but I would tell myself, enjoy the small ones even more.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Betty, for your time and sharing your valuable insights, experiences, and stories with us. Thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at foundersmetal.com. Gather your strength and strike while the iron's hot.